Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We've got some new stuff to talk about today. We're going to get to some of that. One piece of information that came out yesterday, in addition to the non-conference stuff we've been talking about while we wait on the SEC matchups. We haven't got anything from the league yet in terms of the totality of those matchups, and that will include we'll get an inside look initially, and I expect it any day now, at the home and away, the home and the road situations within the SEC. But John Rothstein, as he often does with CBS Sports, he'll get some information. Stuff gets leaked to him about some of the stuff, some of these matchups, and he'll tweet those out, put those out on his social media. Which he did yesterday involving Arkansas and Kentucky. So we're going to talk about that matchup, what he shared about that. And then also, usually when he starts doing that, that means it's coming out, the full thing comes out either later the same day, which didn't happen yesterday, maybe the next day. I noticed he put some more information out earlier this morning about Florida and Kentucky in their league matchup situation. So, any day now, I guess, is the way this should be coming down from the SEC, and we'll have a lot more to talk about. So we'll get to that. Some of the other business that we're going to talk about today is recruiting and the second live eval opportunity for Division I coaches and what that means for Arkansas. And I'm going to share with you where Arkansas coach, who's going to be where and what it means, because it's a lot of hit and miss with dead period, quiet period, and live eval period in the month of June. There's some small windows for things, and one of those windows opened today and runs through tomorrow. So it opens and closes pretty fast. We're going to get to some of that. I'm going to share with you just exactly what Arkansas is doing there, or at least part of what Arkansas is doing, exactly part of what Arkansas is doing there. But first of all, and we haven't done anything like this, we haven't had a reason to, but we're going to talk about a former head hog today, and something that happened. It happened. I've been able to confirm that something happened. And so we're going to just briefly do that because we talk a lot on this segment about Eric Patrick Musselman, EPM. It comes up a lot because the proximity to where we are now, when we're talking, looking back of the last handful of years when the SEC got better and Arkansas's league finishes and the 4 Sweet 16s in the last 5 years and a couple of Elite Eights, talking about various things because we're still new with this coaching staff. And we're still kind of looking at what Arkansas has done recently. And so you can't help but look back a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, when we're talking about the landscape of things, and you're talking about the previous regime. And so most of it's just kind of, academic, right? We're reminding ourselves what happened that year. Even when we're talking scheduling, Arkansas, played here and did this a few years ago when EPM was the coach, those kind of things. Just already in June, I did an episode about Calipari's approach to recruiting in-state, and we went all the way back to the Eddie Sutton years and talked about in-state players and their impact, including the EPM years. So his name comes up quite a bit. I even recently shared the fact that I don't know why we were talking about former coaches, I think assistants, head coaches. And I just threw in there, hey, I got a really nice personalized video from EPM over the holidays. It was around Christmas time. I never brought that up on here, but for whatever reason, it popped into my head and kind of, talking about some of this stuff loosely, and I just threw that in there. So that was a recent show. Yesterday morning, I had one of those 5:30 a.m.s because of my Tuesday and Thursday schedule sends me away most of the day. And so I get them either early or after 7 p.m. And I've been choosing lately to just go early and get it finished. But yesterday we wrapped up the show talking about the Arkansas-Houston game being played at the Barclays Center. And I said, the Barclays Center is a great venue. And I was just there summer before last covering the NBA draft, did one of these segments outside the Barclays Center. You could see it in the background during the day. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun for me. And, just kind of reliving some of the experience because I wasn't there just for a day. It was the NBA draft. There's a lead up to that. I was attending all kinds of events, pre-draft parties. You had as many as 4 Hogs expected potentially to be drafted. 3 of them did. The 3 one-and-done 5-stars, Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr., Jordan Walsh, Ricky Council IV, did get drafted. We thought he might in the second round, and he ends up immediately signing that two-way deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. Anyway, part of what we did is I organized an interview with EPM. Eric Patrick Musselman was in Manhattan to attend the draft, which he did, and be there with his players. Two of which were there in the green room, Black and Smith. And so I think it was the day before the draft, that we worked that out, myself and then Courtney Mims came along with me, and we went to that penthouse that Musselman had arranged to stay for the draft while he was there for the draft. He used that penthouse. It was his wife and some of the assistant coaches were with him. But we sat down with every wall was were windows, big, large windows overlooking, Manhattan. And it was really cool. So I referenced that yesterday. We were on at 5:30 a.m., got off at 6. So I said all of that. I kind of set all that up to say, we talk about the guy a lot. It's always, again, relative to what's going on now. It's not, we don't look for reasons to go and talk about the era, but it's still so new, we have to. All right. So later in the day, in the afternoon, I don't know exactly what time it was in the afternoon, it came to my attention, I was made aware that something had happened. And I didn't know whether it was how accurate it was. Was this a rumor? But it was getting out and up circulating, especially with some basketball folks, that he had collapsed in one of the U.S. Southern Cal athletic facilities yesterday. And this was, again, in the afternoon. And so I saw that, and immediately I was, you're sitting there piecing together, well, is that one of those things that, starts like wildfire? It just may be completely false. It could be. What if there's truth to it? I had concern. I had real concern there. And, I sat on it for about 45 minutes to an hour, and I said, you know what? I'm going to do two things. I'm going to shoot him a text just to check on him. And then I'm going to shoot a text as soon as I send him one to one of his former assistants at Arkansas, because he'll probably know what's going on. If maybe have heard about this. And if not, he'll let me know. I thought I'd go about it two ways, because if it was true, maybe he wouldn't be able to get to his phone. And the worst things sometimes run through your mind when you hear something like that. Like, his dad died young, a college turned pro coach. They had similar coaching paths. They lived for basketball and coaching, and he died young. And so there's that. I think even 2 or 3 years younger, his dad passed than what EPM is now. And so those things kind of run through your mind. And so I just shot him a text, said, hey, I really hope everything's okay. There's a rumor. I don't know how valid it is. I'm hoping it's fake news. But if not, I'm thinking of you, praying for you, your family, and a speedy recovery. It was just that's all it said. I didn't ask him to get back with me, let me know anything. I just threw that out there. And then I basically sent a text to one of his former assistants. And you just, you hope for the best in a situation like that. Because again, who knows, right? But enough people were getting, it seemed like maybe there is something to this. Well, EPM within, I don't know, I have to go back and look at the timeline. Like within a minute or two, he's typing. You can see it on the screen. And so he's responding to me, which is good. So the first thing he does, and this is kind of typical him and in the relationship we have, which we, spanned the years he was here. First things he said was, he acknowledges me and he says, I was listening to your podcast that you did earlier today, and it was just classic, talking about, the interview and and I think he used the word lavish. I think the word I used was the posh penthouse, but he used the word lavish. And he talked about how he thought that was cool that I was talking about that. So to me, that was his way of saying everything's good. And I thought, well, maybe, I'm thinking here now, do I follow up? So that was false info. Was there some truth to that? I'm thinking, do I respond to that, or just take that as that's how he wants to let me know, I'm here, things are good. I don't know, but that's what he said. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to follow up. I'm going to send a follow-up text and just say, hey, that sounds like you're okay. Hopefully, something like that, and not pry too much, but just reply and thank him for the comment. And as I was getting ready to type that in, I see he's typing again. EPM's typing again. So I waited on what else he had to say. Second text coming over. And this second one was pretty lengthy, and he went into detail about the situation. And so I'm not going to go through all that. That's his private, personal business. But enough of this has stirred around. People asking me about it. Some of the stuff that effectively what had gotten out and what I heard, this collapsed, and it was in one of the USC Southern Cal athletic facilities. He downplayed that, and I'll say that he basically, in the way that he explained it, reduced it to something much more more minimal sounding. And then he went through some other information, which I won't share. If he wants to ever put stuff out about that, he can. But it sounded positive to me, and followed up with, something basically positive. So that made me feel good about that. And then we had a few more exchanges, about some stuff, just catching up a little bit, not a whole lot, just kind of brief. But it's good news. And so anyone that saw this, heard about it, if you didn't, it was making its rounds a little bit. The former Arkansas assistant coach got back to me as well, and basically said, he's good. He's good. And he didn't have a lot of information, but he felt like things were okay. And so it didn't surprise him. Had it been something he didn't know about or hadn't heard, it was just sounded made up, he would have said, what are you talking about? What's going on? He didn't do that. So whatever happened, it doesn't sound like like it went south or it was all that serious. And so, but you never take that stuff for granted. And I worked with the guy, I had a working relationship with him for years. Most of it was really, really positive. Not all of it was perfect, but you get in the business and you care about people, and you hope when you hear something like that, you hope for the best. And it turns out it sounds like it was, wasn't as bad maybe as what was going around. And so, again, I'm not, the details of what he shared with me, I'll just leave that for him to put out if he wants to with whomever. I won't be the one to convey more, other than I feel like it's important to say it. It sounds like it wasn't as bad as what was being said, and think things are okay. All right, so we spent a lot of time on that. It's also cool that the former head hog tunes in, right? That was kind of cool. I don't have a lot of interaction with him. I mean, like, he sent the Christmas thing. We had a nice exchange then. The previous time that we'd had any contact or communication was the day that he was announced to the Southern Cal job, and Arkansas didn't have a coach replacement yet. And I congratulated him, and he had nice things to say. And that was really the last time. And, he may have sent me a text or two since the Christmas thing, but it's not been anything big deal. And I always wish him luck. When I hear from him, I send him something nice back, which is genuine. I mean, I mean it, but anyway, the long story short, very interesting how things get around now, especially with social media, and you just don't know what's real. You have no clue. Used to journalism and sports reporting and those things, people, sometimes you get things wrong, but you quickly correct it. But most of the time, there's truth there, mostly true. Even if you don't have all the details, you try to acknowledge that. And now in this wild social media journalism, where anything goes, you just never know what's real, what's not, and maybe alert someone if it's not real. Hey, this is going around. I don't even know if you know that it's kind of circulating a little bit, but this is what's being said. So just one of those things that it turns out there was something to it, but it's maybe not as bad as the initial thing. All right, we are 13, almost 14 minutes in. I spent a lot more time on that than I thought I would. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Once again, it's Kevin McPherson. So today, a couple of things. Let's jump into the scheduling part. Arkansas, Kentucky. Once again, we'll have only a single game according to Rothstein when these matchups drop. It's going to be a one-off, just like it was last year. And so I've always said that Arkansas and Kentucky should play a round robin, a home and away. If you look at the pecking order of the league historically, Kentucky is the number one head honcho blue blood when it comes to basketball. I guess Florida has the strongest case right now, being the second strongest program in the league historically. But Arkansas is right there. When you look at filling arenas and how much basketball means and all of those things at your institution, there are a lot of areas where Arkansas is really right up there second to Kentucky. And no worse than third overall when you look at just on-court results in the history of that. So having said all that, it just makes sense to me that that would be a home and away every year. And I've been around a long time. I've been covering basketball for decades. And, I've been around for these matchups when Arkansas joined the SEC back in the early 90s. They've been incredible. And go back to Eddie Sutton's first Final Four as a head coach at Arkansas in the 77-78 season. It was against Kentucky. And the Wildcats defeated Arkansas in the semifinals. I watched that game. I was a kid, and I went nuts. I mean, I was nuts about basketball already, and was dialed in on that matchup. I promise you that, and the fact that my dad played a little college basketball, but his best friend from high school at Little Rock Central had relocated to Lexington with his family. And so for years growing up as a kid, my dad was traveling to Lexington to go to some of those home games when Arkansas was in the Southwest Conference, Kentucky, and the SEC. And dad was hanging out, going up to Lexington here and there because he's a basketball nut, and going to some of their games, touring their facilities when you go up there. So just for me personally, the Kentucky thing has always been maybe even bigger when these two programs weren't intersecting every year. But anyway, just over the years, watching it since Arkansas has been in the SEC, especially, some huge games. Super Bowl Sunday in '95, Arkansas defending national champs, and going to end up going back to the title game later that year. Kentucky would end up winning it next year, and that Super Bowl Sunday matchup where Scotty Thurman hits the big shot to beat the buzzer, the other buzzer beater. He had several. It wasn't just the Duke game, and it wasn't just this Kentucky game. The Kentucky game was probably the second biggest, obviously. But you had Reggie Garrett, little used guy that was really talented. I used to attend all the Arkansas practices because I lived up there at the time, and Nolan had an open door policy, and they'd practice right there in Bud Walton Arena. So I was in there all the time, and Reggie Garrett was one of the guys that would show out and practice against the defending national championship squad, right, that was really deep, and then you didn't necessarily see him a whole lot in games. But he hits a half-court shot right before halftime to beat the buzzer in that Kentucky game. I mean, some of those matchups, over the years, even when Arkansas wasn't as good, if you go back to Mike Anderson's first NIT run, that team in 13-14 swept Kentucky, home and away. And both of those games, I believe, went to overtime. And the one in Fayetteville, we know how it ended with the Michael Qualls putback jam, at basically just barely get beaten the buzzer off that Kai Madden pull-up three. And so, you have so much history. If you look at if you look at just the Bobby Portis year and Anderson's best season in Arkansas, where the team finished ranked 20th in the nation, I think it was the only year out of 8 where Arkansas finished the season ranked. They finished second to a Kentucky team that went undefeated in the regular season and advanced, I believe, losing in the national semifinals, the Final Four, if I'm not mistaken, in Wisconsin. But Bobby Portis got SEC Player of the Year. That was a loaded Kentucky squad. It's almost unheard of to see at this level, at the high major level, teams going unbeaten that long and forever, it seemed like. But that team had Karl Anthony Towns and Willie Cauley-Stein and Trey Stahl, several guys that are still in the NBA. Tyler Eulis, one of the Arkansas assistants, was the point guard on that team. So the history here, all of it, but just the last few years, I don't know, the last coach that won multiple games in Rupp Arena was probably Nolan. But Eric Patrick Musselman did that. In his 5 years, he won 2 games in Rupp. And he had a big home win. I think he only beat him once at Bud Walton Arena, but it was a big one. It was that second Elite Eight run, and Arkansas beat number 1 Auburn in the building. They beat a highly ranked Tennessee team. That was a home and away. Arkansas would lose the last regular season game at Tennessee, but in that stretch in February, they beat Tennessee. But Kentucky came in, I think, ranked in the top 10. They were like 6th or 7th or 8th, something like that. And Arkansas won that game at home as well. And that was the team that the second Elite Eight team, I think that was the 2021-22 season. So there's a great history between these programs. And it gets loud in there when it was Calipari as the opposing coach with bringing his Kentucky Wildcats in. And some of those games were really good. I mean, close battles, win or lose. And so that's the history. And then last year, we know the storylines. It was one of those situations. You go to Rupp, the place is raucous, everything you expect. Rick Pitino with the build-up, hey, don't boo the guy, show class. that that wasn't going to hold. And it's not that it was just gosh awful, but it's what you expected. I mean, it was a lot of intensity, a lot of excitement, a lot of anticipation. And then Arkansas goes in the building and Rupp and takes the Wildcats behind the woodshed. So if you look at the last 5 or 6 years, including while Calipari was coach there, Arkansas's won 3 times in Rupp. But they haven't won but just once in that same time frame. When you look at EPM stretch, and they didn't host, obviously, Kentucky last year. So they get a chance now to be back home. You'd like to see the home and away. I think, every year. I just went through some of the history, some of the excitement. It makes sense to me to play twice, but all right, you get another year of just one, and year 2 for Calipari at Arkansas after spending 15 at Kentucky. Gosh, I mean, could you get viewers if you did it twice? Could you double down on maximizing the billing? Of course you could. I don't know why, but again, let's focus on the fact you get them back, you get them at home. And so I think that atmosphere, when I was on my Drive Time Sports segment radio yesterday evening, I talked about the fact that I've been to most of the big games in that building over time. And it's just been wild atmospheres. I mean, on the biggest stages when you play them in there. But I think this will be one that will probably be a little more memorable in terms of the anticipation, the build up, students camping out, the intensity, the buzz inside the building, the decibel level, all that stuff has the potential. Because remember, these are 2 teams that are going to be predicted at the top of the league. Probably Florida 1, and Arkansas and Kentucky in some order, with maybe 1 or 2 other schools right there after Florida. And who knows where they'll be when the dates are for that, when the date will be for that game. Last year it was early February. We don't know any of that yet. We haven't even seen all the league matchups yet. But according to Rossing, they play once, and it makes sense. If you played on the road last year and you're only going to play once the next year, you're home again. But that atmosphere, I expect, will be one of the best I've ever seen in that building. And some of the best ones I've seen are when Kentucky came in with Calipari. I think having him as coach, and the fact that Arkansas and this Big Blue Nation, Razorback Nation and Big Blue Nation, back and forth since he became Head Hog, has been on another level. And one of those things where both sides are accusing the other of being in their head and can't move on. It's, the jilted boyfriend, girlfriend breakup and all that stuff. Those things get heightened when you actually play, right? It just sends it to another frenzy. So I spent a lot of time on that, saying it's going to be a big matchup anyway. That, I go back again to the Super Bowl Sunday at BWA, and that atmosphere for a defending national champ, 2 top 5, 10 rated teams matching up, and how that game, the drama to how it finished. We don't know what if this game itself, once the whistle blows, turns into a dud, but everything around it will be mega. And I think both teams potentially, you're looking at top 5 to 10 rated teams by then if things go as they'll be predicted in the preseason, because they're both going to be predicted around that 10th, 11th, that sort of that 12th, close to the top 10 if they're not in it preseason. When the actual rankings come out a little later, right before the season, they could be in position for that to be a mega conference matchup, regardless of all the storylines that surround it. So we spent more time really talking about one matchup. When this full round robin drops, the next episode I do is going to be about all of it. And we've spent so much time on this one. Trust me, when we do that episode talking about all of it, we'll probably spend more time talking about Arkansas, Kentucky again. I'll repeat some of this stuff, and I'll have more to add to it. But right now, based on the perceived strength of both programs and again the storylines and the history, this is always, to me, one of the marquee matchups now every year, until it's not. It's one that should be talked about. All right, so let's now wrap up. We're almost 25 minutes in. Real quickly, of this recruiting cycle. So technically the 2026 class that you're in, when you're talking about high school and spring and summer grassroots, the second live evaluation period, well, it's really the third. It starts today. The first one was one of the first, the first one that overlapped with the high school part of it was the NBA Draft Combine. So college coaches could go to that and do live evals, but as some of those players are going to opt out, come back to school. And so that was a live eval session. And at the end of it, it overlapped a little bit with the first true high school part of it, and the mid-May. I think I don't remember the exact dates of that. It's like May 13th to the 15th or something like that, 14th to the 16th, whatever, 16th to the 18th. I'm losing it. It was a weekend. And I was in Memphis for the Nike YBL session, and Calipari and Chin Coleman were there. You had Kenny Payne and Chuck Martin in Council Bluffs, Iowa for the Adidas 3SSB. And so we went through all the names in the follow-up shows, after I got back from Memphis. I spent a week breaking down and saving some for other days, talking about the guys they're really prioritizing. It was like 12 to 15 names that they're really heavy on, and got a chance to see up close and personal. And I interviewed a lot of those players, put a lot of highlights out from these events. The previous event for Adidas earlier in the month that wasn't live eval, I was out there putting out interviews and highlights, and shared some of that with the staff. But you know what? This is the next one. And so it starts today, and it's a little bit different. These aren't shoe circuit events. It's the MBPA Top 100 camp, one of the most elite, prestigious camps for the top players in the country. And so it's annual. We talk about it all the time. There's some other ones out there, the Nike Elite 100, Pangos, which just ended, and we talked a little bit about some of that recently. But this is probably the best one at this point in June, because of how many they bring in. Top 100 tells you it's 100 players. I think this time they've actually got 111. But Arkansas will be there. They were there last year. And John Calipari and the staff, most of the staff, if not all of the staff that could go, were there at some point. And so it's a 2-day window. You get today, the 11th, and then tomorrow, the 12th, to be there. The camp's already been going on, but these are the 2 days, and this is where you'll see a lot of the 5-on-5 play competition. They'll separate into teams. There'll be a lot of stuff going on for coaches to take in and evaluate, but also to be seen. And so I know for a fact Arkansas assistant coach Chuck Martin is due there today. J.J. Andrews recently committed, can't sign until November, but the top 25 rated 5-star in my book, 6'6" wing at Little Rock Christian Academy. He's at the camp this week taking part. So Arkansas, I assume outside of Chuck Martin, there'll be more. I know Calipari is all over the place right now. He's making it, he's been going to playoff games where his players are involved, especially Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the league MVP, who's trying to lead the Thunder to a title, and some pro hogs mixed in that, obviously, with OKC and Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams. So you've got NBA Finals game tonight. You've also got Calipari talking about going to Omaha at some point and supporting the Diamond Hogs, which he put a nice video out yesterday praising the work that Dave Van Horn has done with that program and what he's seen since being at Arkansas and how well that's run. And he talked about when you're drawing in, copious amounts of fans, it's not just about the attendance numbers, it's about when you're seeing those kind of numbers and you're one of the leaders in your sport in fan interest and attendance, it means that everybody's buying in and they feel like they're part of it. And Calipari talks about that all the time. He wants his fan base to feel a part of what his team's doing. So he praised all that, but he said, I'm also trying to work my schedule to make it out to Omaha to see the Diamond Hogs. Well, if he's going to go and take advantage of this live eval period, not saying he has to, but he did last year for this event. And so the fact that Chuck Martin will be there, I've confirmed that, but I expect or assume or think it's likely, I don't know if it'll happen, that Calipari makes an appearance at least for a day. I don't know that, perhaps other staff members. But I mentioned J.J. Andrews is there going through it. Caleb Holt, who just went through the Adidas Euro camp in Treviso, Italy, got top camp performer. He's already doing good things at this camp. He's one of the big names, top 10 rated 5-star guard out of the Atlanta area. Just announced that he's transferred out of Grayson High School and will play at one of these independent schools, Prolific Prep, for his senior season. But Arkansas is recruiting him. So Caleb Holt, Taj Ariza, all the names that I've been talking about, bringing their game highlights from the sessions I talked about, the early spring sessions in May, and even some interviews with these guys. And I interviewed both of those guys and put those out on Twitter. Erifan Diane is also taking part, and we've talked a ton about him because he intends to visit Arkansas in September. We know that Kenny Payne who's Arkansas's big man coach, is kind of the lead in his recruitment. Calipari flew out to see him at Iowa United, but he's at MBPA Top 100 camp this week. So that'll be another player that Arkansas is really focused on and keeping eyes on, and they've prioritized him. Abdou Toure, we've talked about, another wing that plays on the out east. Notre Dame High School. I think is it Connecticut? But he's also taking part. Excuse me. He took an unofficial visit to Arkansas back in October when Arkansas hosted the weekend, and he attended the game the weekend. Arkansas football. The football Hogs hosted LSU. Same weekend that Chris Sinak, who's at Houston, who Arkansas will face in New York City, in this upcoming season. Same weekend that he visited Arkansas. But Abdou Toure, Tay Kenny off the Adidas circuit, Kentucky native who plays at Overtime Elite. He also took part in that Adidas Euro camp, as did Deron Rippey Jr., another player that, again, on the Adidas circuit, who Arkansas has been recruiting. Martin's been involved extensively with both of those guards whose names I just mentioned, both 6'2" and under. And both, again, took part in the Euro camp. Now, look, Rippey Jr. blew up over there. He had a great event. And so, again, these guys you continue to evaluate. You continue to want them to know that you're there, you're present for their for what they've got going on. Jalen Montanati out of Owasso, Oklahoma, a top 20 rated 5-star, 6'7" wing that Arkansas. He's had multiple unofficial visits on campus for basketball games. So he is another player that's taken part in the camp, and Arkansas continues to recruit him. And then Ikenna Alozie, who we talked about off the Nike EYBL circuit, a 6'3", 6'4" guard who's top 10 rated 5-star. So a lot of top 10, top 20 rated 5-star guys, including top 25 rated J.J. Andrews, who's already committed to Arkansas from the class of 2026. Oh, by the way, it's a smaller group of 2027 that gets to take part. And one of those guys is Beckham Black, who just helped the Team USA Junior National U16 win that gold medal, blew the competition away. Those games just played out. And he was one of the top performers there. I think he might have set a record for assists and maybe steals as well. But he was the guy they handed the championship trophy to, and then the team formed around him and they hoisted that thing. I don't know if you saw that video. But his older brother's Anthony Black, and we've been talking a lot about him, how he wants to be recruited by Arkansas. He was on campus for that Arkansas OU game. Unfortunately, a loss. But had a great time for that. Of course, his brother in his one and done season got a lot out of his Arkansas experience. Has been loyal to the program. A guy that returns. Had a nice sit down interview with him that I put out and talked about. We had a segment where we talked about some of this stuff not that long ago. But Beckham Black's taking part, and there's one class of 2028 participant, as far as I know, the number 1 rated player, Eric Dampier Jr. For those who can recall, back in the day, really during one of the strongest periods in SEC basketball before now, he was a stud center for the Mississippi State Bulldogs and ended up having an NBA career. But his son has taken part in that as well from class of 2028. So even some of the young studs are getting in there and getting opportunities. All right, 33 and a half minutes in. We'll keep an eye as we go. We've gone through all these names before, but it's important to know they're all there, and that's why Arkansas is there. And I will just button it up with this. There are probably between 5 to 8 more players who I can't name right now, I'm sworn to secrecy, that Arkansas is serious about and keeping an eye on during this event and moving forward. As you get into the July, that's the biggest month for live eval. You'll have at least 2 opportunities, maybe 3 for D1 coaches, and the shoe circuits are, ramping up their championship play. So some of those games, as you get through them, are the better teams, and there's no shortage of high level guys competing in those situations. So the live eval stuff will continue through July, but this is a big one. Only 2 days again, MBPA Top 100 camp. This year it's in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I think last year it was in Orlando, Florida. I know it's been there. I don't know if it was there last year, but it's been there recently. And it's also previously been played. It used to be played the first few years on the campus of Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia. All right, signing off for real this time. Kevin McPherson, HogvilleNET, YouTube Live. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't done it already. It helps us out. We may come back on today if something breaks. I am going to give, I meant to give a little Egor Ryzhov update. I don't have any more source info. I've got 4 now that think he's Arkansas bound. I don't have anything more in that direction. We're still on commitment watch. The only update I really have, and I almost forgot to talk about this today because I forgot to write it down with the other stuff, but I did tease it in the tweet. The only thing a couple of people have gotten back to me and said, hey, I don't know how long it'll take for his commitment to come out because we are on commitment watch. If something doesn't blow it up, but that there may be some complexities and complications with the international stuff and when he might be, when all that might get resolved and he's actually available. So that's really the only nugget I wanted to share on that today, which is, that's not what you want to hear if that's the guy and it's going to be announced soon that it may be a while before and remember, Big Z, Zvonimir Visic, his freshman season, he was a late addition to the roster anyway by Calipari. And then he it was back and forth with NCAA, and finally he got cleared in time to play the last 15. So basically half the season, effectively. So, you never know about some of these things. Some of these things move along faster, some not. But just word got back to me that maybe there'd be a little bit more of a process there. All right, now I really am signing off. I put that at the end. My apologies for skipping over that until I at least latched back onto it before we signed off. Thanks for being here. Until next time, take care of yourselves. We appreciate you. See you soon.